Наверное, ни для кого это не неожиданность, но для меня я очень сильно почувствовала то, что тема критической географии – это в первую очередь политический вопрос. Вот. Я думаю, что это очевидно, но для меня это было вот сегодня ощутимо просто на каком-то физическом уровне, что это вопросы культурной политики, вопросы постоянных смен иерархии, брендирования, продаж, и все это включает в себя вопросы критической географии. И еще на что я обратила внимание, тоже довольно, наверное, всем очевидно, это ощущение настоящего и попытка понять, что же такое современность, и именно из этой ситуации посмотреть на историю искусства. Я тот человек, как раз у которого в университете, о котором говорила Наталья Владимировна, у которых в университете не было современного искусства. То есть мы останавливались в лучшем случае на середине, на первой половине 20 века или вообще на начале. И поэтому вот это почти физическое ощущение современности, оно для меня кажется очень интересным. И у меня есть два вопроса. Один к Наталье Владимировне, связанный с Петровским. И, ну и вообще, может быть, ко всем, потому что у меня есть какое-то некомфортное чувство, когда я его читаю, что его предложение в основу сменить как бы иерархии и положить в основу авангард, что он как будто подменяет один язык другим, как будто просто на смену там, вот, искусству 1900 года он просто предлагает какой-то другой язык, который выстроит точно такую же иерархию территории. Так ли это? Я не права, не так понимаю.
Это не совсем так, то есть я думаю, что это все-таки не так, потому что речь идет все-таки о создании каких-то контекстов. То есть его предложение, оно не носит императивный характер, оно не носит такого характера, как бы столбовой дороги истории. И в то же время понятно, что можно уже предлагать другие концепции. Авангард была одна из таких его предложений, и как раз вот когда появился интернациональ, вот это объединение, там было несколько выставок, посвященных именно авангарду. Дело в том, что сейчас авангард является таким инструментом, поскольку его не существует, все уже знают, что как бы авангарда нет, да, то можно работать с этим как с инструментом. А что мы к этому относим, почему мы об этом говорим? И как некий концепт, который дает основания для разговора. Тут могут быть разные понимания. Вот, и тут можно спорить на разные темы, но все-таки для него главное это была контекстуализация художника, как, если считается как авангардный художник, это определенная контекстуализация. То есть здесь нет все-таки столбовой.
И к докладу Анны мне было очень интересно, что это unlearning как будто бы включает в себя какую-то смену именно даже зрения, то есть не столько как мы концептуально смотрим, сколько как мы вот смотрим глазами, я не знаю. Когда я читала ваш текст часть про Пикассо, про гитару, и у меня было ощущение, что в эту концепцию заложена смена зрения еще на искусство. Так ли это? Нужно ли сторону? Потому что это довольно сложная концепция для меня, вот я с ней знакомлюсь, и заложена ли здесь вот эта вот смена того, как мы смотрим, именно вот даже физически?
Because when we have a goal and we know what we should look for, we do not, we simply omit many things, yes? And my example was not the Museum of Irkutsk, but Picasso guitar, because although Picasso's genius was obvious for all art historians, but not his funny guitars made out of cartoon. Yes, these are not. They were not perceived like masterpieces because they are not in this art historian line. Yes, so this is a problem. But I think that we are talking about two kinds of avant-garde. Yes, we are talking about. May I tell something? Yes, it's this right moment. Okay, I think that we are talking about the avant-garde which is supported by state and avant-garde which is well, grassroots or something like that. And you are talking about Chagall's exposition in Paris. I can tell you about another exposition I have seen at Centre Pompidou this year. It was an exhibition about Cubism. Cubism is not only the avant-garde exhibition, but it is also the exhibition of French imperialism. And it was very obvious for Marcel Duchamp and people like that who Duchamp, brothers of Duchamp didn't want him to expose in 1912 on the Society of Independent Artists because although Duchamp was joined Cubism, he was seen as a nuisance for his brothers because he didn't go for the direction they wanted him to go as a cubist. So it was a really curious situation because they were all avant-gardists, Duchamp and his brothers and all this circle of Kupka and other artists. They met in Pitagorov and wherever. But what Duchamp astounded so much, it was the situation that they are not in the phase of discussion and of showing many directions, but there is one direction which is imposed even if in this small group. Yes, so he dismissed. He didn't want to do that, and I talk about Cubism because Cubism was extremely important for whole Europe and also for Poland, and it was such a new opening. But we haven't, we didn't know that it was also the imposture of French point of view and French clarté, which is beyond this idea of Cubism. Yes, that this links between Cubism and this one-way development is quite obvious, and Duchamp didn't want that. So he didn't want to be in any system of grouping, any system of grouping which support French cultural policy, let's say like that. So that's why he went to America, and he was transnational artist. Yes. So I think that we can use this term also for Malevich. He was transnational artist, and this is so important for us now to realize that this kind of avant-garde was in fact this legacy of Duchamp is the legacy of anti-authoritarian, not connected with this groupings and showing good future. Yes, we should develop only in one direction, shown by Cubism or other ism and so on. So this is why he was so important for the whole Europe, and he was completely absent in Poland, Duchamp, because he was a nuisance, and we wanted to build modern society. And to build modern society, we don't need nuisances, we need collectivity. Yes. So this is a real problem. How we can collect people, union people, but not depriving them of their own ideas, of their own identity, and to have this agonism, situation of pluralism, and not of one direction. Yes.
Can I say something about Duchamp and his specificity? I think because you talked about the political situation, and I think what Duchamp was very inspired by, and Lyotard talks about it too, it's about what's really happening in the world right now, not on a political level, but rather about the industrial level, that what he experienced very well in the United States, and it was about the workers that were before in the fields, and then their body actually was put into the factories, and the idea of the production in the factories by those same people that were displaced by political but more economical situation. So I think his work was very much, that's why I think he dropped completely the Cubism. It was this interest when I read, when Lyotard talked about this, I thought this was a very good observation, because it was true to what he was attracted and what allowed him to actually express himself by products that were done and objects that were created by especially those people that were before, that were transformed. They were actually transformed and survived this transformation. And that's why I thought, that for me, this was kind of more than he wanted to be special, he wanted to be really true. And that's why he stopped painting after 13 paintings, because it just didn't work anymore in the flatness of representation, but rather in something that would make you rethink the identity of those objects, the identity of the body.
Да, хотела бы сказать. Я в процессе выступлений сконцентрировалась как бы на том, что вопрос истории, в какой момент и откуда мы смотрим на историю, из прошлого, из настоящего, и каким образом мы ее как бы конструируем, эту историю, из настоящего или из прошлого. И какими методами мы можем это делать. Слушая выступление Натальи Владимировны, мне показалось, что вот эта концепция авангарда, она работает и из настоящего, и из прошлого одновременно. Или, возможно, я ошибаюсь. То есть как выстраивается вот это отношение к истории. И второй вопрос, который тоже, мне кажется, важным, все-таки авангард как концепция, про которую вы говорите, она связана с локацией, не связана с локацией, или каждый момент, в каждой точке отсчета это какая-то концепция одна, но она применяется по-разному.
Спасибо за вопрос. Я хотела бы сначала отреагировать на Анне выступление, потому что я не согласна по поводу сравнения Дюшана и Малевича. Мне кажется, это совсем разные фигуры. И в отношении кубизма и в отношении национальных. Тут не в таких терминах я бы говорила, но по-разному. И это тот мой упрек тоже центру Помпиду, потому как была сделана выставка по отношению к Малевичу. Разница между Малевичем и Дюшаном в том, что Малевич создал школу. Дюшан не создавал школу, у него не было этой задачи. Он вообще, как известно, создал мало работы. Ему это было не нужно. Совершенно, он действительно очень индивидуальный путь у него. Для Малевича было очень важно создать школу. Для него было очень важно видеть себя в контексте истории. И в этом плане он с очень многими тут соединяется теми, кто пишет нужно видеть себя в истории искусства. Это художник, это такая традиция, про это пишет Жан-Мари Шефер, «La Relâche moderne». Вот в этой книге мне очень нравится этот анализ, где он говорит про романтизм и про традицию такого романтического художника, которую я вижу у Малевича как некую радикализацию вот этого романтизма. То есть художник, который обязательно рассматривает себя, проецирует как бы свое творчество на свою собственную историю. И поэтому у Малевича его начало, его самоосмысления, это все от кубизма к супрематизму, от кубизма к футуризму к супрематизму. Вот обязательная история, вот этот кубизм, через который мы не можем пройти. Этот кубизм нам здесь в печенках сидит в России, потому что все понималось через удивительно неверно понятый кубизм. Все те, кто учились у нас в художественной школе, они все знают, как это интерпретировалось и какая это была вот такая иерархическая система воспитания, но при этом альтернативная соцреализму, но точно такая же в плане вот такого директивного воспитания. Но у Малевича-то совсем другое. Для Малевича важно найти какую-то концепцию, какое-то видение целого мира, в котором и восприятие, и познание, и искусство, и наука, ничто как бы другому не противоречит, и все это в целом, все это связано на эмоциональном уровне, через ощущение идет. И все это вместе можно вписать вот, через эту теорию прибавочного элемента, которую он создает. И дальше мы видим эту подобную концепцию унизма Джеминского. Они, конечно, отличаются, но тут очень много общего. Вот, в то время как Дюшан все-таки не ставился на таких задач, как я себя понимаю. И потом Дюшан, почему Дюшана мы не знали совершенно в Польше, его совершенно не знали у нас. Еще 20 лет назад приезжали сюда лекторы, читали лекции во французском университетском колледже. Никто из присутствующих в зале, там было 200 человек, не знал, кто такой Марсель Дюшан. Вот за последние 20 лет уже мы знаем, мы говорим, кто такой Марсель Дюшан, есть книги, которые тоже ничего не знали. Но ведь надо вспомнить, что и во Франции не знали. Что когда он приезжает, когда в 60-е годы начали новые веяния приходить из Америки, то Дюшана открыли. Никто не знал во Франции Дюшана. Поэтому это тоже такой момент, мне кажется.
Natasha, may I ask you something? Because we are talking about Piotrowski, and he has written such a book about Russian avant-garde, you probably do not know because it is only in Polish language. And it was, he had such an idea as a young scholar about ethical history of art, yes? And he asked here the question whether Russian avant-garde knew about Lager, about this concentration camp, I don't know, how do you call it?
Sorry, do you mean gulags?
Yes, gulags, yes, all this. Well, they knew about that, yes? And he gave many examples that they knew about that, and he said they didn't want to relate.
So do you mean in the 30s?
Yes. He gave the example that they knew the situation, and they do not want to relate about this. So sorry to compare Duchamp and Malevich. This is a completely different situation, but the problem, I think, of which Piotrowski, who is very left as a writer, but at the same time he's Polish, so he knows that this left, these were ideas which were somehow connected with lack of independence of Poland, because many left Polish artists wanted to join the Soviet Union and so on. So it is, Polish situation is very critical in this moment. This relation with being left and being know about what is going on in Soviet Union. Yes. So I think that Westerners, sorry to say like that in a general way, they do not usually, as being left, do not think much about the situation. Yes? So that they carry on to be in a revolution, knowing what is going on. Yes. So,
but this is Paris. Is that in Paris there was a complete antithesis between communist artists, including communist modernists, and the abstract artists who did not want to involve politics in what they were doing, including neo-avant-garde, if you want to use that term. But I mean, I've specialised in the communist debates in Paris, for example, okay, because the same thing happens in Italy. But the other thing that scholars of presumably Russia today and Eastern Europe do is they absolutely refuse, and I've discussed this with Clara Kemp-Welch in Snow to do with progresses, they refuse to accept the existence of Western communist parties as something absolutely important, including up to 1976, if you want to take a date to do with the debate about the renunciation of the revolution of the proletariat. They just do not like to think that there were absolutely violent debates whose bottom line, that's what the only reason, I don't know the only reason, that's why I'm interested, the bottom line of these debates was to do with the gulags. Either you were on the, not the right, you were in a centrist or Western, in like NATO-affiliated position, like Raymond Aron, and the whole of the kind of middle towards the right in France, thinking that you had to have a NATO alliance against a quote-unquote communist threat, or you were pro-communist, you refused to think that the gulags were anything other than an unfortunate serve. But this is in the middle of Western Europe. The Western Europe, and therefore the abstract artists, I mean, there's a load of Cold War history and historiography on like debates in the 50s between the abstract artists who just didn't want to talk about it, like the Vasarely exhibition on the Cultural Centre, who's Hungarian. Either they didn't want to talk about it because they said it wasn't to do with art's remit, and socialist realism was disgustingly bad art, or they did want to talk about it. But the gulag, I mean, I totally agree with you, the gulag question is an absolute bottom line. And also, it doesn't come out, and the interesting thing I think about Moscow conceptualism is Moscow conceptualism, I don't know if within Moscow refuses to discuss this, whereas, and I mean, Boris Groys said the 70s were great, we never had it so good. I don't know if it's actually just to do with how IER is created for public consumption, because in IER magazine, all the way through, there is no mention of the gulag, and the gulag mention is in the very rare literature number 1, literature, 1985, where Golemstock gives biographies of the writers he treats, and in the biographies he says disappeared, or he says died. I don't know if he uses the word gulag, but he mentions people who disappeared or died. That is the only mention in the IER magazine of the gulag. So there's this very weird way in which also a kind of anxiety to join a global debate, bearing in mind that IER is produced in Paris and is trilingual, actually does not want to talk about this either. And I don't really see that there's much going on here from a revisionist point of view to do with this debate either. I mean, I don't really know, because everyone is now in an understandable way, obsessed with contemporary art, but there seems to be very little debate about anesthesia as opposed to being Promethean or having tertiary memory. There seems to be very little debate about the problem of memory in post-war Russia, post-war Soviet Union. At the time of the Cold War, there seems to be, I mean, you could tell me what's going on, but you talked about your syllabus going up to Picasso and then stopping. Do you talk about what Soviet art after 1945 on your syllabus?
We talked a little bit about paintings, just how it was painted, who was painted, but we talked about every art like that, you know.
I see. So, I mean, there's a huge problem to do with this memory study. So, the thing is not just art history catching up, but what's been going on in all these other fields to do with your own art history of the immediate post-war and Cold War era as well as contemporary.
But memory studies are starting now, and we have a lot of discussions about how to live near this memory of Gulag, near this oblivion, but contemporary art, I think now in Russia, just beginning to work with it.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly it's theater and literature as far as I see. But artists are like very...
Can I just want to ask a factual question? Is your guy, what's his name? Shkersky, I can't pronounce his name. Shkersky. Is he a rampant Catholic or not?
Yes.
Oh, I see. So he's writing from the point of view of completely believing.
His brother,
is he a believing Catholic?
He's now, his brother is now one of men in colleague of president, and he's
so he's a right-wing Catholic.
Yes.
It's rather unusual.
Yeah, this is very unusual because as right-wing he's very open, yes, and he gives these examples not like Donald Kaspit or someone else, but this is all awful, yes, he says it is interesting somehow, and in a very intelligent way he simply puts such things like civic society done by Pope, so it is really very curious, yes.
Can you deconstruct that? Because to me, thinking, God, this man must be a bit of a crazy Catholic. Nonetheless, what he said about these millions of people seemed to me very empirical. So can you tell me, because obviously I don't understand it from your point of view, why was that not correct? Because millions and millions and millions of people, and there are an enormous number statistically of believing Catholics in Poland, did go to all those masses, so it was a huge group phenomenon. So what did he say in terms of a societal consensus that you think was not objective? Because I literally didn't quite...
Yes, this is my solitary point of view, that he says about civic society and about obedience at the same time. Yes? So I don't think it matches. Yes, to be obedient and to build civic society. To have someone on the top who tells you what you should.
Aren't most practicing Catholic Poles very obedient, and most girls don't have contraception and everything? I mean, is it pretty obedient?
Yes, so I am fighting for girls who are not. I hope my students are not obedient. And I hate this obedient kind.
Yeah.
We are very nice people in Poland, yes, and we don't want to quarrel. Yes, we always are looking for consensus. Yes. And we have this system of groupings. You are either left or right, yes, and there is nothing in the middle. You must always be in
is that not a generational position?
I don't know. I'm afraid that, there is such a term by Kiosev, self-colonization, yes, that Polish people like self-colonization, that they stopped with Sovietization and Now they look at the West and simply mimic what is going on there, yes. And when you thought you must recognize your own position, talking to Russian scientists, to Russian studies, I think that this is the same idea in Poland, yes, because we are implementing October, yes, group. Every one of us has read Rosalind Krauss and so on, and this is our Bible, yes, and I mean this young generation, yes, not for me because I was raised in a different way, so I read later. But coming back to you, I think that the problem is that Piotrowski gives such a dichotomy: modernism, which is Western, and social realism, which is Soviet.
It's a very old dichotomy.
I do not completely agree with this because there were modernist communists, obviously, on the West, and this is first point. And then when you say, I wish he were here, Piotrowski, because when you says about Malevich as an agent of modernization, he would say, wow, modernization is Western concept. There is no modernization which can come from Soviet Union. I think he would say like that. I'm afraid.
Проблема в том, что мы используем слова, ну, во-первых, это мы уже начинаем область по критической географии, которая у нас несколько больше, насколько я понимаю. Сейчас нам, я так понимаю, нам нужно закругляться, да? Вот, но я скажу, что все-таки мы используем эти слова с латинскими корнями. По-русски я говорю, что он как бы является агентом современности, все-таки. И когда мы говорим модернизация, модернити, мы оказываемся в плену разных латинских терминов, которые по-русски, например, даже, я не знаю, по-польски ближе, конечно, к латинскому, но по-русски это уже совершенно иные слова, иные термины с иным бэкграундом. Но я так понимаю, что сейчас нам нужно заканчивать.
Наташа, один вопрос или...
Точнее, два комментария. Может быть, я тоже на английском, чтобы я реагировался. First one was in reaction to what you, Sara, said about discussion or absence of discussion of Gulag, for example, in Aya. And I can say that there was a big discussion of it during the exhibition in Moscow at the Centre Pompidou. Oh yeah, it was outside, yeah. Yeah, and Shilkovsky, who was the editor of Aya, participated in the colloquium organized in Sorbonne, which was called Art and Communist Power. And at the end of this colloquium, Shilkovsky and a couple of Polish artists, Elżbieta and Czesław, made an artwork as a kind of protest, contestatory artwork in front of the Centre Pompidou, and inside the Centre Pompidou it was Malevich coffin. And Shilkovsky put a text, he included a text about this colloquium and this intervention with some pictures of this performance at the end of the first number of Aya. And as he told me, the person who funded this first edition, Jacques Milcanian, actually put... Sorry?
I can't hear you. Can you speak louder?
Yeah, okay, I will try. So the person who started to fund the Aya, Milcanian, he said that one of the conditions of his funding was that there is no political information, no political discussion. Nevertheless, Shilkovsky put this note with one picture, and actually Jacques Milcanian stopped to fund, and then Shilkovsky had to look for other fundings.
Oh, that's so interesting, because I met Melkonian at the end, and he never told me that.
And the second comment was about all the discussions about various approaches, concepts, how we should
deconstruct one hierarchy and whether there is no, or whether there is a danger to create a different hierarchy. And in this case, I asked myself, how is it possible to create, is it possible at all to create a kind of neutral approach? Because we live in the era of information, there is so much information, and for me it's very remarkable that when Piotrowski elaborated his horizontal approach, it was made while he studied, while he was discovering the art of different countries of Eastern Europe. So it was because he learned the work of these artists, he was interested in this context, so that pushed him to create another approach. But we cannot know everything to create a kind of neutral approach. And in this case, I remember what you, Esther, told yesterday about listening. So you come and you listen what the place, what people who live here tell you. Well, these are just open questions that came to my mind during this discussion.
Just to talk about Malevic and Duchamp, I think there's so much of similarities between them too. And Malevic is deconstructing the icon and making this black square, and Duchamp is deconstructing the idea of the object from an object, the same object as a work of art. And Duchamp is so relevant till today, actually today more than ever, because the world is just full of works of art that are done from found object in different, so it's like, I think both were very, very important because of the act of deconstruction that they did to the item.
Yes, but there are two different frames of thinking about Malevich and Duchamp. So I agree with you.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. I feel like I came home.